Welcome back to the Nest Peeps. Today we are going to continue making progress on that Gatorman army by painting up Calaban the Gravewalker. Calaban is a Minions Gatorman Warlock, and he has been my bread and butter for the past couple months now. The first list I started with Minions was with Maylock, but I wasn't having very much progress with the Maylock list that I was running, so I decided to give Calaban a try. And I'm really enjoying how Calaban plays on the table. However, this is not a video about how Calaban plays, it's how I decided to paint it up. In the future, I will be making a video about the list that I've been running with Calaban. I just want to get it on the table a couple of more times, get more comfortable with it before I start talking about it. I really want to understand how the list plays before I start rattling it off to you. But for now, let's get started painting this guy up. This time around, I changed up the process a little bit. I added some black in with our Ardennes green for the base coat of these scales. I did this to eliminate the subsequent wash step, which turns out not only saves time, but looks much better too. Once that dries, I follow the same dry brushing steps that I did with the previous models in this army. I took some pure Ardennes green onto the dry brush and started accentuating those scales. Then we dry brush on the final highlight, which is Irati green from scale 75. Everything with how I'm painting the belly scales here is the same as with the Wrestler and the Posse. First, applying the base coat of Sherwood green from scale color 75. This normally takes about 3 coats due to the opacity of the scale color paints and how dark the green is that I'm painting this onto. From here I proceed on to the dark tone wash step, but I think in the future I'm going to do the same thing that I did with the scales, and I'm going to mix in a little bit of a dark brown or something to darken up the original base coat so that I don't have to then wash this to get the base tone that I'm looking for. Once that wash dries though, we come in with some more of that Sherwood green and we start to clean it up and bring out the details, leaving the wash in the deepest most shadows. This is one of the steps in this process that takes the most time, and that's because I'm working with a very thinned down paint and trying to slowly layer up the transition from the darkest areas to the brightest areas. Once I have the mid-tone where I want it, I come in with some fall green from scale 75 and begin to work up my highlights. Again, here I am taking my time with this highlight, working with my paint in a glaze consistency, slowly building up to a fully opaque fall green. And we continue that process all the way onto the underside of the tail. And just like with all of our other gators, we take some Army Painter matte black and we paint the back scales, also known as the scute, or at least I think that's how you pronounce it. Then while that is drying, we come in with some alien purple from Army Painter mixed in with a little bit of black to base coat all of the leather bits. And then while this dries, we come in with some black forest green from scale 75 and we apply a dry brush of that onto our back scales. It really ends up being more of an overbrush because of how skinny that section of scales is. Once that's dry though, we come in with some dark tone wash from Army Painter and we apply that to the back scales. This is going to get rid of that dusty look and bring it all together. From there we come in with some pure alien purple from Army Painter and we begin to establish the mid-tones on all of these leather scraps of this kilt-esque thing Calaban is wearing. And finally we work some Army Painter Ooze Purple into a glaze and we slowly begin to highlight all of the edges to these leather scraps. Next up, all of the feathery bits. I come in with some Cantabric Blue from scale 75, and we give everything that is this feathery fur texture a base coat. Then I come in with some of that Ooze Purple, and I wet blend it into our blue here. I'm doing this to tie everything in tonally so we don't end up with a clown fiesta. As is true with any time we are wet blending, I take the time to work back and forth, put a little bit of blue on my brush, blend it in, go back, put some more of the purple on my brush, blend that in, trying to keep everything working while it is still wet until you get a nice transition from the blue to the purple. And then once all of that has dried, we come in and apply a dry brush of Caribbean Blue from scale 75. I take my time with this dry brushing step because I don't want to completely blow out all of the work that I did with the wet blending. I want to keep that purple to blue transition as an undertone to all these feathers. Next, I come in and I base coat all of the bony bits with Iraqi sand from Vallejo. I've been using this method for painting bone for a while now, and I love the old dried out bone look that this method provides. The next step to this is dry brushing all of the bone with some off-white. We take our time with this dry brush and proceed slowly because I'm not trying to get any overspill on the surrounding areas. And with some Vallejo Game Color Heavy Brown, we paint in all of the ropes. Due to the little kit bash that I did here, replacing the alligator skull with a ram's skull, I had to add some more ropes wrapped around, so there were a lot more ropes on here to paint than I had anticipated. I decided to paint the rope that Calaban is holding the skull with metallic and turn it into a chain, only to kinda break things up a bit. Everything was bone and rope, and I needed to get something in there to break that up. I also painted the things on the necklace metallic to think them as like bullets or something instead of bone, again to break up everything that's bone on this model. Then I take that same heavy brown and I apply a base coat to specific sections of this headdress. I wanted to make this more visually interesting, so I didn't want to paint the entire headdress piece one color. And we make sure that we apply our two thin coats because we want to get nice solid coverage of this brown. Then I come in with some platinum silver from Vallejo Game Color and I add a dot highlight to all of the sections of the chain that he's holding onto with this skull. And then we paint these other sections of the headdress in the same manner that we used to paint the kilt. We have some alien purple from Army Painter mixed in with some black for our base coat, making sure we get a nice smooth layer. Then while we wait for that to dry, I come in with some more of that Iraqi sand and I add some dot highlights to the snout of this headdress. And I take that same Iraqi sand and I sketch in some wood grain or lines on the top section of this headdress. From there we load some alien purple back into our brush and we begin to establish our midtones on the mask. With this midtone I'm working quickly and just roughly sketching it in. I'm going to blend it out with the highlight later along with a glaze of this same alien purple. We are going to cover most of the surface here, but we want to leave the deepest recesses as that dark purple base coat. Once we have established those midtones, we come in with a glazed down ooze purple and we begin to build up our highlights slowly with stippling. Using the stippling technique here will help give this section of the mask that purple leather look that we are going for. We just slowly build this up with each subsequent layer of this glaze, focusing more towards the center to build up that highlight. Once we have finished with the purple leather sections of the mask, we come in and we apply a base coat of black to this little gem that I sculpted out and put on the ram's skull to hide all my mistakes in the rope, and the chevron sections of this headdress. We are doing this to establish the black base coat that we need in order to apply our Turbo Dork color shift paints. While that's drying, we take some dark red from Vallejo Model Color and we apply the base coat for the inside of the mouth and the tongue. And then we apply some rough highlights of Vallejo Game Color Squid Pink to all of the fleshy bits inside the mouth. Next, I take the time to cut in all of the teeth with some off-white. Then we come back to those areas that we base coated in black earlier and we apply our Turbo Dork Shell Shocked Color Shift paint. I really love this paint, and it is a shame that it doesn't really show up on camera. It shifts between like a teal and a purple, and I absolutely love how it kind of shimmers, kind of like magic when you have them on the table. Then I apply some Army Painter Red Tone Wash to the mouth fleshy bits. This really brings that squid pink in line tonally with the dark red base coats with minimal effort. Here we apply some Army Painter Soft Tone to everything on this model that is bone, starting with the staff. And we're also going to put this on all of the ropes so we can be kind of haphazard with it. There are bones all over this thing, so this wash step took a little bit longer than I had expected. We also used the soft tone on all of the teeth, because a gator with perfectly white teeth is just weird. And then we also applied this soft tone wash to all of the brown sections of our headdress. And then everything that we painted with silver is going to get a dark tone wash. And then while I had the dark tone wash out, I decided to apply a little bit of that to the tips of the horns on this ram skull. Now it's time for some of the final touches. I forgot to hit record when I base coated the eyes in white, but I did that, and here I am applying the fluorescent magenta from Vallejo. I did the same thing for the center of the gem here in this staff, but it looked weird, so I replaced it with copper and a gold highlight, and then gave it a dark tone wash. This looks much better. And finally, with some dark tone wash, I apply a recess shade to all of the feather bits to kind of separate them away from the back scales. I do the same thing here for the leather bits. From there I did the simple swamp base that I do with all of my gators and applied a matte varnish. If you're interested in seeing how I do this swamp base, I'll put a link here for my Gatorman posse video where I go into detail on the swamp bases. Well, what do you guys think of Calaban? I'm really starting to get a feel for how this army is going to look once it's completely painted, and I'm very excited about it. With Calaban complete, I'm really starting to get a feel for how this army is going to look when it's all together painted, and I gotta say, I am very excited for the day that I can get my fully painted Minions army on the table. With that said, I just gotta keep repeating the mantra, one mini at a time. I'll eventually get there. I'm kind of painting these guys to a bit of a ridiculous standard for an entire army, but I'm really loving the process. But what do you think about how I painted Calaban? And what do you think of Calaban as a warlock in general? Let me know in the comments section down below. Remember to like, share, subscribe, all that other social media stuff. For now, I've got to fly. As always, keep on painting, peeps.